Hi, I'm Marc Randolph. I was the co-founder and first CEO of Netflix, but more importantly, I'm one of the passionate few. I think it was a great interview because we actually explored that fundamentally. If you want to make something happen, you just have to start. You've got to get it out of your head. And that's the beginning. Where you take it from there, that's up to you. But if we can help you get going, that'd be a good first step.
Hey guys, welcome to the special episode of the Passionate Few podcast today. It's your host, Omar, here, and today you're in for a treat because we get to sit down with not only the co founder, but the first CEO of Netflix, Marc Randolph, to hear his incredible story about how him and Reed took the company from literally zero to a $250 billion cap company. So in this interview, you're going to hear everything from how the company started to how they mailed the first DVD, how they came up with a bunch of crazy names they came up with, how they went $50 million in debt, almost sold a Blockbuster, and rode the roller coaster of success, changing their business models so many times before ultimately finding the success that would allow them to reach hundreds of millions of people around the world. So I really want to encourage you guys to sit back, relax, enjoy this powerful interview with Marc as he shares not only the philosophy, strategies, and mindset that took him from zero to where he's at today, founding nearly 6 companies that have also had massive success, but also why he authored his new book called That Will Never Work to help entrepreneurs collide their dreams with reality and not get stuck in paralysis analysis no matter what the naysayers around you might be saying. So with no further ado, I want to encourage you guys to sit back, relax, enjoy this powerful interview with none other than the co-founder and the first CEO of the $250 billion cap company, Marc Randolph. And also, if you're watching this interview at any point, you're like, whoa, holy cow, this interview is incredible. This is unbelievable. I want to share my story, my business, and my brand right here on the show. Well, you're in luck because now at any point during or after this interview, you can click the link below in the description, fill out a short questionnaire, and if our team thinks that you'd be a good fit, who knows, you may just be invited right here as an ambassador to be featured on the Passionate Few podcast and YouTube show worldwide to share your story, your business, and your incredible offer with a new audience. So with no further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy this powerful interview with Marc Randolph. Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Passionate Few podcast today. Today we are joined by a man who needs no introduction. He's the co-founder and the first CEO of Netflix, and he's also the author of That Will Never Work. And he's on a mission to help entrepreneurs really collide their ideas with reality to help iterate those ideas and turn them into successes because, as we all know, not all ideas come out fully formed. So thank you so much for being on the show today, Marc, and I'm excited to delve into your story and wisdom.
Oh, I am too. Lots to talk about. Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely, man. So let's get right into it. A lot of people may not know who you are, but for the audience who does know who you are, maybe catch them up to speed, give them a little bit of context as to your relationship with Netflix and the role you played in it and how instrumental you were from day one.
I don't even know how to frame that. I mean, basically, I guess I was there before there was even a Netflix, before there was even the idea for Netflix, and was kind of shepherding that whole initial phase of going, what is this company going to be? What a problem are we going to try and solve? And then once we had an idea, how are we actually going to try and solve it?
Mhm.
Um, so I would have to say I was pretty much there at the very beginning.
Yep. And also, would you mind just real quick moving the camera down just a little bit, just so we have a little bit more of a frame?
I'm going to move myself up. That's actually easier. Like,
Perfect.
like so.
Yep, it's perfect as is. And so take us back. What year was Netflix started? Because a lot of people may have seen it after the 2000s, but it was actually in the 90s that the ball started rolling.
No, it's very, very true. The ball started rolling in 1997, which was when I was going to lose a job that I had. A company was being sold, and I was being cast out. Not quite so harshly as that. They were keeping me around for 6 months, so I had time to think about what I do next. And the next thing was obviously starting another company. So this was 1997, and spend most of that year brainstorming ideas. And I had a co-founder, a guy named Reed Hastings,
Mhm.
who was not actually going to come and join the company. He was going to be the board chair. He was going to be my angel investor, but we were going to come up with an idea together. And that was for most of 1997. Came up with an idea, which we can talk about in a little bit,
Mhm.
and then funded the company in the fall of 97 and spent 6 months just getting it off the ground. And actually, the launch date, right pretty soon to near today, is April 14th, 1998. So
Wow.
coming up on 23 years ago.
Holy cow.
Yep.
And I want to get into it because a lot of people may not know that you've obviously been a serial entrepreneur. And a big thing you talk about in the book, That Will Never Work, is the fact that there's no such thing as a good idea in terms of having social proof that it'll be a good idea until you actually rub it against reality. So can you dive in, because a lot of our audience are entrepreneurs, anywhere from their early 20s to even their late 50s, right? Entrepreneurs who maybe had a company, maybe had an exit, they want another company, and so they're listening to these success stories of entrepreneurs looking for common denominators, patterns, but it all starts at the beginning with the idea. So can you zoom in on why you're so passionate about this concept of testing ideas even simpler than with a minimum viable product and rubbing them against reality instead of worrying about investors and this and that. What's been your experience with that?
So there's a reason why the book is called That'll Never Work. There's a reason why the podcast is called That Will Never Work. It's because that is what I was told time and time again, not just with Netflix, but with all the other startups that I've either done. And I must have heard it 1,000 times. But you mentioned you have a lot of entrepreneurs who listen. Listen, we have all heard it.
Mhm.
You wake up with a great idea and you can't wait to share it with somebody, and you tell your spouse or you tell your coworkers or your friends. Everyone says that'll never work. And one of the most valuable things I think I've learned as an entrepreneur is that no one really knows, that there's no way to know whether it's a good idea or a bad idea
Mhm.
without trying it first. And actually, in my 40 years of being an entrepreneur, I've learned something even more dramatic than that, which is there's no such thing as a good idea. No idea survives that first collision with the real world. But what that does is that collision begins to inform you about what about your idea is flawed. What is the next thing to try? It is the process. And I think too many people struggle with getting that first idea right. They're asking everybody, what do you think of my idea? They don't want to start until they have some confidence that this idea might work. But it's all such a complete waste of time.
Mhm.
Asking people's opinion is fine because you do want to know as much as you can before you get started. But you certainly don't want to take someone's word as gospel that it'll never work. You
Mhm.
have to, only way to find out is to do it. And if you're also one of those people who is waiting, going, okay, um, I don't want to do this till I really have some confidence. And you're trying to figure out a way to see around the corner, and you're getting up on a stool and you're leaning forward and you're commissioning surveys and forming tasks, all kinds of bullshit to try and figure out in advance if it's going to work. You're either never going to start, or when you finally do, you're way too late. And the simplest way to see around that corner is to take those first few steps.
Mhm.
Oh, shit, I can see around the corner. And oh, doesn't look anything like I expected. And that's when the journey really begins.
I love that. And it's interesting because in entrepreneurship, I'm sure you've heard the expression, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Where is the line between, throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks versus kind of being all over the place? Entrepreneurs naturally are not very rational people, right? By definition, we're kind of dreaming something invisible and trying to turn it into reality. So where do you see in your experience, obviously growing Netflix day one, but also, all your other experience and all the other entrepreneurs you've, I'm sure at this stage met and talked to and researched and kind of been in the trenches with, what have you seen between the difference between what is effectively throwing spaghetti at the wall and what is just throwing too much spaghetti or being all over the place with ideas to see what works?
There's always listen, my background, even before Silicon Valley, before doing tech startups, was I was a direct marketing guy.
Mhm.
I did junk mail, I did catalogs, I did direct response, did magazine circulation. All of these things were the same basic thing. It was the precursors to e-commerce. Um, and one of the disciplines you realize is that there's really two kinds of tests you have to do. There's an iterative test and there's breakthrough testing. Um, and you need to be doing both of those at the same time. And in a startup, it's no different. You begin to get an inkling of what might work, and you're constantly tweaking it. And that kind of testing comes from I need to sign people up, and I'm trying to figure out ridiculous things. Should I have two screens for asking for their address and their credit card, or should they each be on different screens? Which one et cetera.
Right.
But at the same time, you've got to be doing breakthrough things. You've got to be trying brand new approaches, because the wonderful thing about internet testing, the wonderful thing about direct marketing is that you could test a million different things.
Mhm.
And the wonderful thing is, you know exactly that the blue envelope, this is back from my mail order days, does better than the red envelope. You know it to 4 decimal points. But what
Mhm.
it never tells you is why blue and why red? Why not one of the other 6 million colors? So this is a long way of saying you can't just throw everything at the wall. And I don't even like the analogy of throw spaghetti at the wall. It just sounds way too random.
Mhm.
I'm extremely deliberate about what I test. We spend huge amounts of time, even at Netflix and other companies, arguing about what is the right thing to try. And more importantly, how are we going to know if it's successful or not? You spend probably 3 times as much time figuring out what are the definitions of success? How am I going to measure this? How
Right.
will I know whether it's working or not? Um, but being deliberate doesn't mean being overly cautious.
Mhm.
You know, at Netflix, when we did finally launch, it was a DVD rental by mail business. And the idea that everyone said would never work, well, they were right, because it didn't work. But we spent a year and a half trying things, trying to figure out something that would work. And some of them were iterative. Some of them were saying, well, we're currently renting this certain way. Maybe we can do, buy two, get one free. Maybe we could do punch cards. Those are all kind of just iterative ones. But at the same time, you're trying these crazy breakout ideas that are completely out of left field.
Mhm.
And it turns out that the path for Netflix was a breakout idea. We were not able to iterate our way to it. But
How,
I
how,
couldn't have told you that at the beginning. That just happened to be the way it worked out.
how far off is the Netflix today from the original idea, just so the
Oh,
audience can get a glimpse of it?
oh, that's a great thing to say. Yeah, because the Netflix now bears no resemblance to the Netflix back then. I mean, at the very beginning, there was no streaming.
Mhm.
If you wanted a movie, we mailed it to you
Mhm.
on a DVD in a little red envelope. There was no real business model innovation. It was like a video rental store. There was due dates. There was late fees. We'd mail it to you. You'd have 7 days to watch it. And if you didn't return it, we began charging you for that. There was none of the predictive algorithms. We were not creating our own movies, our own television shows. We're taking content that other people had developed and basically being a distribution platform for it.
And
But
how?
listen, you had to start someplace. This is back in 1998.
Mhm.
There was no way to do streaming back then, even though we knew it was inevitable that at some point people would be streaming or downloading or doing some kind of digital delivery.
Mhm.
At that time, there was a million barriers. I
Mhm.
mean, there was no bandwidth. And if there was bandwidth for the home, it terminated in your office, not in your living room.
Right.
There wasn't the digital rights management. There was a whole bunch of problems. And the biggest one was that Hollywood, which is kind of a notoriously conservative industry,
Mhm.
had zero interest in having their bits be in the free and clear,
Yeah.
having just come off another period in history that some of you may remember, which is uh, when music all of a
Napster.
sudden
Yeah.
was Napstered.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they realized completely down the tubes, and Hollywood was not going to let that happen.
Mhm.
So, you know, we knew from day one that yes, eventually there would be a streaming or a downloading business. But if we had built the business around that in 1998, we never would have gotten to 1999. We never would have gotten to the fall of 98. So
Mhm.
the trick was, how do you build a business which is viable in 1998? And more importantly, that the equity that you build up in terms of what you learn, what customers think about you, the expertise you develop is equity that you can carry with you when streaming does become a viable option. And that was probably one of the most clever things that we did at Netflix.
Makes sense. And then what about take me back to day one? Because you guys had this idea where you guys conceived it. And I know you guys went right away to, I believe it was a store in town that didn't have DVDs. I believe they had CDs and you guys mailed it to yourself. So another example of like you talk about in the book and through your podcast, you know, clashing that idea with reality. How long from it was it a conversation with Reed where it went from conversation to action, right? What was the time difference from that?
Oh, probably 15 minutes. No, I'm totally serious. Because you have to bring this back. This is in 1997. This is during the 6 month period where Reed and I knew we were going to be losing our jobs, but still had to go to work. And the wonderful thing is that both Reed and I lived in the same town. We carpooled together. We've been doing so for a long time and become friends that way.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, we realized we're both going to be out of a job. I go, I'm going to start another company, and I want it to be an e-commerce company. Reed doesn't want to begin another company, but he wants to stay in the game. So he decides he will fund this one. He'll be the chairman. So that was setting the stage. And so this was also not like Reed and I were big video guys. This is not like we would argue in the car about who the best French directors were, or
Yeah, you weren't movie buffs per se.
no, God, who should have won best Oscar for cinematography?
Right.
I had little kids. I probably watched Lion King more times than you can imagine. And that was the extent of my movie watching. So I was pitching him all kinds of ideas. One of the classic ones I pitched him was personalized shampoo, where you'd cut off a lock of your hair and you'd mail it to us, and then our team of hair scientists would formulate the blend just for you. And you subscribe to it. And
yes. Now, do you come up with these ideas sober, or is this a little?
Yeah, they have all kinds of interesting sources. You can tell it's not, if them who's watching this, it's not a personal experience thing. Another one was custom dog food, where we formulate a blend for your particular pet, for their age, climate, activity level, whatever. Another one was personalized sporting goods. We'd use a computer-controlled milling machine to make baseball bats or surfboards, all one of a kind. But you see all these crazy things. And then one of the other crazy idea was video rental by mail. Pretty much unrelated, but I had a lot of mail order experience, and I knew a lot about shipping, and I knew a lot about next day shipping. And I was looking at video rental going, wow, $8 billion category. There's got to be a way to do this better.
Right.
The problem was, again, 1998, this is 97 actually, video is coming on those VHS cassettes, big and heavy and expensive. And so that idea also discarded the way the shampoo and the dog food were. But here's the point where you were mentioning before, is a few months later, Reed hears about this technology called the DVD, that little flat, thin disc. And that is the moment that the light bulb goes off. And I don't think that if we had not had this discussion 2 months ago about video rental by mail with VHS, and if I hadn't already spent dozens of hours researching how that might be able to work and concluded it's a good idea except for VHS. If those things hadn't happened and Reed had gotten in the car and goes, I read about this DVD thing, both of us would have gone, oh, that's interesting. All right, now here's another idea. It would have gone nowhere.
Yeah.
But instead, it was like, wow, that actually might re-engage this thing we were talking about 2 months ago. And that's where the 15 minutes come. As soon as we had that realization, as soon as we began to get excited about the fact that we might actually be able just to mail DVDs to people. We don't need DHL. We don't need Federal Express. But then, and this is the point, is that we did not do what people think entrepreneurs do, which is quick, let's go to the office and begin working on our business plan. Or quick, let's go start working on the pitch deck. Or let's try and book ourselves on Shark Tank or whatever bullshit people think is what entrepreneurs do. We said, wow, here's a neat idea. Is there a way we could figure out if this actually is going to work or not? And we turned the car around mid-commute and drove back into town and went looking for a DVD. And of course, there weren't any. It was in test market, and it certainly wasn't going to be in our little town. And so settled for buying a used music CD, which we mailed to Reed's house in a little envelope we bought at a greeting card store. And we found out in less than 24 hours that, yes, you could mail a DVD to yourself, that, yes, it would arrive unbroken, that, yes, it gets there quickly and for the price of a postage stamp. And that was colliding the idea with reality. And armed with that, went forward saying, this actually might work.
How important is speed when testing?
Speed, well, yeah, I'd say it's very important. I mean, there's three critical things to testing. The success when you're trying to do something that no one has done before
Mhm.
is proportionate to how many things you try. It's as simple as that.
I love
So
that. I love that.
taking one thing you try, I'm going to spend 3 months getting it perfect. Well, great. You have one thing you've tried. But since nobody knows anything, since there's no such thing as a good idea, you've got to try hundreds of ideas. And so success is proportionate to how many you can try. And the number of things you try
Mhm.
is proportionate to how quickly, cheaply, and easily you can test them.
Mhm.
So so speed is one component of that.
Mhm.
And listen, it's a lesson that it took me a while to learn because no one else heard this, but you and I were saying before, I'm kind of a perfectionist. And so you'd have this idea, you'd want to do a test, and all of a sudden you're commissioning custom photography and everyone's arguing over the copy, and you go, we should get a copy editor involved, and we're going to
And then
stress test the site and test the links, and
oh,
you
yes.
waste 2 months, and then the
Mhm.
test doesn't work, and you go, shit, we just wasted 2 months. Maybe we should go a little faster. And little by little, you learn these shortcuts to basically get tests out the door, 5 or 6 in the same day.
Mhm.
And they're terrible. They're sloppy. There's misspellings, there's typos, there's the wrong image. You crash the site, the links are dead. But this insight about, you ask about how going fast, the insight is it doesn't make a difference how crappy it is. Because if it's a bad idea, then these perfectly crafted 2 month tests aren't going to make them into good ideas. But if
Mhm.
you've even got a glimmer of something that's going to resonate with a customer, then they don't care how bad it is. They will reboot the site over and over again. They'll keep trying the links. They'll phone you. They'll find your unlisted address and knock on the door. And they'll tell you as clear as day, this is the thing that's working. This is what you need to fix. And you never discover those things without trying hundreds of things. And if you're still working on these perfect tests, if you're still building the infamous minimal viable product, you are wasting so much time.
Mhm.
Minimal viable product is way too much. You want to build a minimal unviable product. You want to parse your problem apart, and say, most of the crap I do not need to test. Do you have a moment here? I'll give you a quick example. I don't want
Absolutely.
to,
Please.
yeah.
Yeah, please.
So one of the entrepreneurs, this is a number of years ago, he has the great idea. They're at a party. It's like late at night and it's raining, and they're all arguing about whose turn it is to go out and buy beer, whatever it is. And a light bulb goes off. Why don't I have an app? It knows where I am. It knows my tastes. It knows the open liquor stores. I hit the button, has my credit card stored, and boom, beer shows up.
Mhm.
Now, back in 1998, 7 or 98, when to test that, you would have to build it. Blah, blah, blah. He didn't want any of that. Didn't want to raise money. Didn't know how to code. And he began parsing that problem apart, which is, do you need to test that you can build an app? No, I know I can build an app. I know my phone can figure out where I am. I know customers will trust storing a credit card. I know I can find a database of open liquor stores. I'm fundamentally curious about none of that stuff. I'm curious about, does anyone care? Is anyone going to order? What's the average order size going to be? What's the repeat rate going to be? And so he tested this not by building a minimal viable product. He basically took business cards and printed up, need beer, call me,
Mhm.
and did that in about 10 minutes. And then went and stood outside of buildings on Fridays and Saturday nights. And anyone in the right demographic who came in, he gave them a card and said, hey, if you need beer, call me.
Mhm.
And they'd call, and he'd get in his bike and he'd go to the liquor store and he'd buy the beer and he'd deliver it. And it's completely non-repeatable. It's completely non-scalable. But he found out in one weekend not only whether it was a good idea or a bad idea, but did so with huge nuance about, wow, these are all tiny orders. Wow, they're all coming in compressed until 1 to 3 o'clock in the morning. Everyone's drunk. There's no repeat business.
Mhm.
But he bumped into other things and he iterated his idea and he iterated it. And each iteration was able to be done almost overnight because all he was iterating was what it said in the card and who he handed it to. He did that for 6 months. So that's an example of what I mean by don't build a minimal viable product. The trick these days, you got me rolling here.
I liked it.
The trick these days is not how clever you are coming up with an idea. The trick these days, and the best entrepreneurs are the ones who are clever enough to figure out ways to quickly, cheaply, and easily test their ideas. I mean, even just on the podcast I do, I'm working with early stage entrepreneurs. I'm mentoring, I'm coaching live. People are listening, you're listening into that. And even today, I got someone who was saying, I have this great idea for an app to do this. How do I do that without building the app? And I'm going, oh God, you don't need to build the app is what makes it repeatable and scalable.
Mhm.
But you're not curious about the app. You're curious about the underlying behavior.
Mhm.
And that you can figure it out with a piece of paper. And that's the clever way. How can we figure out how to test this without actually doing it?
I love it. The underlying behavior. Now, Mark, I got to ask, did a lot of this come, I'm sure this wisdom came in stages, but how much of the wisdom came from prior entrepreneurial experiences versus the behemoth that was Netflix, that is Netflix? Was Netflix like, did Netflix kind of like teach you this stuff at a multiple and you had kind of learned it prior, or was Netflix like you get what I'm
No,
saying?
I
It
know
was,
exactly what you're saying.
yeah.
And no, it's cumulative learning. I mean, for the purposes of illustration,
Mhm.
objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. In other words, I'm using Netflix as examples sometimes of things that have happened over a long period of time.
Mhm.
But, I've been doing, Netflix is essentially an e-commerce company,
Mhm.
or was. Now it's much more of a Hollywood company. But
Right.
a lot of the stuff that the internet enabled were things that I was doing before, using catalogs and mailing pieces. And
Mhm.
so you learn little by little. A lot of the entrepreneurial principles that I put in place at Netflix and that I put in place at the next company I did after Netflix are
Mhm.
ones that I learned little by little over time. I learned things even before I began doing, for-profit startups. The best way to learn this stuff is by doing it. And the best way to do it is by doing it small and making mistakes early and simply, rather than going, oh, I want to do this. So the only way to do it is to raise money and hire a lot of people and go after some big category. You're going to get your ass handed to you.
Yeah, I
Uh,
find I find that too, even with a lot of my entrepreneurial colleagues. I think in this day and age, there's this whole thing of like have an idea and then they spend most of their time trying to meet investors, trying to get on Shark. It's like they want the hoopla of it more than they want to see if it works with one customer and then 10 customers. And then
It's really tragic in a way. I mean, one of the advantages I think I had is that I wanted to be I was an entrepreneur before there was such a thing. I mean, there was such a thing, obviously, but no
yeah,
one called it that. And there certainly were not
raised
university
for it.
majors, and there weren't
Yeah.
incubators, and there weren't TV shows and movies. And I mean, none of that stuff existed. And so you were doing it because you were compelled. I mean, you were driven to do this. It was that you could not do it. And unfortunately, now so many people, as you mentioned, they it's this glamorous thing in a perverse way.
Mhm.
It's parties and it's pitching and it's raising money and it's flying around in a private jet. And God, I
Yeah.
got to tell you that doesn't happen. None of those things happen that often.
Yeah.
Most of your day is doing something very, very different, which is just trying to solve really interesting problems, sometimes very iteratively and repetitively with not much success. And
Yes.
some people, myself included, totally dig that. I mean, but I never had my objective that I was going to make money at this. I
Mhm.
never even less likely was that anybody would know who the hell I was. I
Mhm.
mean, all those things were never part of the equation. They're just happy, not even happy. There's things that just happened to happen. The
Was
thing that I
business
wanted, I got, which was the challenge of solving really cool problems. But you're right. The
yeah.
thing you've got to be driven by is that I've got my idea. Can I figure out how to make my idea work?
Mhm.
And if you're waiting, I've heard them all the reasons why I can't start. Got to graduate. I've got to need a computer science degree. I need a technical co-founder. I need to
Capital. Yeah.
raise money. I need blah 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 blah, blah bullshit. If you have the number one interviewing question that I certainly work with for hiring engineering talent anyway is always what are you building on the side? That's what I want to know. I want to see where the passion is. And that's where people get excited. They tell you the stuff they're working on after hours. They spend all weekend coding.
I
You know,
love
that
it.
they're
So
in it, they're in it for the right reason.
business is sport for you, it sounds like.
That's a great, yeah, that's a great analogy. It's definitely passion.
Mhm.
I love,
Passion.
I'm the luckiest guy you'll ever meet because I love that process of solving these kinds of problems, and I get to do that for a living.
Yeah.
Uh,
Now,
what's better than that?
when you started as an entrepreneur when you were younger, I mean, did you have entrepreneurial aspirations like, oh, I want to make a bunch of money? I mean, was that the thing, or were you just trying to solve problems and make a profit, and you got a kick out of making a profit from the idea? If we go back to,
Never was this about I want to make a lot of money at it, because again, that wasn't the path. It wasn't an obvious path. Uh, there were these hints of I wanted to be entrepreneurial. My father um, had invented something. He had a patent.
Mhm.
And I remember being a little kid, like 6 or 7, and looking at his patent and going, oh my God, that is so cool that he invented something. So I always had this passion to like invent something. And I
Mm.
had a little notebook that I used to jot down all the crazy, ridiculous ideas I would have for inventions. So to some degree, it was there. But I think what was driving it was something different, is that when I bumped into something I didn't know how to do or didn't know how to solve, it was this stimulus for, I'm going to figure it out. I had this really early job where I sold seeds, flower seeds and vegetable seeds door to door for the American Seed Company.
How old were
It
you at
was,
that time?
what's that?
How old were you at that time?
Yeah, I was probably 8 or 9.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was pretty close to indentured servitude because, you basically, if you sold 17 gazillion packs of seeds, you could earn a stopwatch or a whistle or something ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but anyway, what it was basically going door to door, being a door to door salesperson. And you're getting the door slammed in your face, and and some kids would go, screw this, I'm going to go sit on the couch. But I was going, I'm going to figure out how to get this to stop happening.
Mhm.
What can I say? What can I do that gets the door to stay open? And then once that happens, what do I do or say to get an order? And once I do that, what do I do or say to get a bigger order? It was a game to me. And so I was just wired that way. And then little by little, I was always the person, in high school and in college, even, where I would see a hole and instinctively want to fill it. I'd want to launch a magazine. I'd want to start a club.
Mhm.
I'd want to put on a play. I just want to, for me, the most thrilling thing in the world was getting a bunch of people together and doing something that hadn't been done before. And there was no money in that. It was the opposite. I was lucky that I was able to do this even for free. But
Does it
it
does
was
it
great training.
does it ever trip you out? Do you ever like pinch yourself and go, "Holy shit!" Like, how the hell did a regular guy like me come up with like one of the biggest things on planet Earth with Netflix?
Oh, absolutely. It's astounding to me sometimes. I mean, you always start something
Mhm.
with a hope that it will be successful.
Mhm.
But what Netflix has done has gone so far beyond not only what I expected or wanted, but whatever I didn't could never have imagined it was possible. I mean, if you had told me, if I had come out to you, in 1998 and said, one day you'll see it's going to have 200 million subscribers and it's going to be in almost every country and we're going to make our own movies and produce our own TV show. And there's even going to be this expression called Netflix and chill. I would have gone, you would have had me committed.
Yeah.
Just no way would that ever happen.
Yeah.
And if you would, but if anyway, it's the same for everything. If you, I've done 7 companies now,
Mhm.
and if you would, and 2 of them big, 2 of them multi-billion-dollar companies,
Mhm.
uh, 3 of them IPOs, 1 of them total crash and burn.
Mhm.
But I promised, if you had laid out all 7 on day 1 and said, rank them, nope. Pick them, nope. They're all complete. You have no idea. So Netflix was just one more, and that one just happened to. A lot of stuff broke right for us. We happened to be in the right place at the right time, happened to navigate the transition from DVD to streaming really well. Just a lot of stuff went right, and it was the right place at the right time. But it certainly was a nice outcome for me in a bunch of ways. But I would have been fine if it hadn't. I would have done the next one and gotten enjoyment from that.
Do you remember the day you guys named it Netflix, the conversation?
I absolutely do.
What were some of the other names, or what were those conversations like?
Well, the thing is, naming, as you probably know, is a tricky one, and even trickier now. But you needed to try and bring together a bunch of stuff. You needed a name that was evocative, hopefully what you do, that was catchy, that you could spell, you could remember. And then, of course, you needed to have a domain name, which matched that ideally. You needed to have a trademarkable. You need a lot of criteria, and now it's worse because now you also need Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, blah blah blah. You need a million different things, and getting that all to align is impossible. But anyway, so at the beginning, you have a name that you use to put in the checks to pay people. It's on the lease, so take the pressure off picking your real name. And our beta name, as it's called, was Kibble, like the dog food. And I still own actually Kibble.com.
Bits and Kibble.
Yeah, Kibbles and Bits. Yeah. But I got this great advice from one of the early mentors of mine. He said, make sure that beta name is so bad, because when you get to the point you need the real name, you're going to be sorely tempted to just use the beta name because it's already there. So what we had was we had a whiteboard, and we had made 2 columns. And one was words that were evocative of the internet. And the other one was words evocative of either movies or rental. And then we had a grab bag of just random ones. And, so we had web flicks and e-flicks and e-cine, for cine, whatever it was. I don't know what it means, all kinds of crap. And studio was in there. And we had all these things, permutations of it. And I was running them all down. Like, can I get the domain name? Nope, taken. Oh crap, this means something obscene in Lithuanian. All these disqualifiers.
Now, is this you and the team, or you and Reed, or how big is the team at this stage of trying to name it and figure?
It's about a dozen people at this point.
Okay, and are you allowing them to participate in the dialogue, or did you?
Oh yeah. So we'd all sit and brainstorm. Then they'd go back to work, and I'd have my yellow pad with 15 or 20 candidates, and then I'm sitting there typing them all in, trying to figure out, is this domain name available? Is it taken, et cetera? And the interesting thing is Netflix was one of the candidates, but people didn't like that name because back in the 80s and 90s, kind of a euphemism for a pornographic movie was a skin flick, or plural, skin flicks. And so people are going, oh, I don't know about this Netflix. It doesn't sound like it has the right family-friendly connotation. And that big X at the end, that just like accents the whole thing. But we went through this whole list, and the ones that I liked better were taken. And so, Netflix, it sounded a little porny, but we went with it.
Yeah, clearly it worked. What was the second or third option, if off top, if you could share, or if you can't share, it's okay. But
in a weird way, I really liked replay.com.
Replay.
Yeah, because again, it was a DVD rental by mail business. And so I liked the idea of the play, like on a VCR or a DVD player, and replay was kind of implied this whole mailing it out, bringing it back. You get to do it again.
Yeah. It was implicit of like continuity.
Exactly. I kind of like that one. And the problem is replay.com was available, but $40,000, pal, which now, of course, would be an unbelievable bargain. Right. But that may as well have been $40 million back then. There's no way I was going to pay $40,000 for a domain name.
What was the capital you guys started with in Netflix?
Reed wrote a check for $2 million. Actually, not quite. He wrote a check for $1.9 million. And then we decided we needed to kind of validate that we weren't completely out of our minds by convincing at least 3 or 4 other people to put in a little bit of money.
Mhm.
So we raised 1.9 million from Reed. He was the big angel investor.
Mhm.
And we raised another $100,000 from 4 small angels.
And be honest with me, Mark. Was there ever a part in year one, year two, where you thought, "Holy shit, this is not going to work. Like maybe we should cut our losses here," or was there enough? Was there enough sort of blood in the water that the shark in you was like, "Ah, maybe we can make this work"? I mean, take me back to those, that time of like, if there was a time of like, "Ah, shit, I don't know," or were you just did momentum kind of kick in at a certain point?
No, I'm an optimist, and I always manage to. I won't say blood in the water is the right euphemism, but I mean, I always see that there's always a glimmer of hope in even the most abject failure, and usually there is. Even at the very least, you've proven you've one thing you can check off your list is not working, and then begin to say, well, if that completely didn't work, what does that tell you about what might work? And it informs your next tries.
Mhm.
I mean, there were certainly times where I was really discouraged, where I was thinking we are toast, but never did I really say, okay, I'm ready to give up.
Mhm.
I mean, the closest we came to saying we're ready to give up was probably 2.5 years
Mhm.
uh, in the year 2000 at this point, when ironically, we had finally kind of figured it out.
Mhm.
We had found the repeatable, scalable business model that was going to work. And this was not streaming still, but it was subscription. And it was this crazy no due dates, no late fees model where we'd mail you a disc and you could keep it as long as you want. And when you watch the movie, you mail it back, we automatically replace it. And you could have a movie sitting on top of your television for 2 months for all we care. But we billed every month for the subscription for that service. And it worked phenomenally well. People loved it. But it was a subscription business. And if you're familiar with, continuity and recurring revenue programs, they have a wonderful aspect is that once you have a customer, they pay you for a long time, little by little by little. But the downside is all of your acquisition cost takes place up front.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so they're very cash intensive. And it's
Mhm.
kind of this weird quirk that the more successful you are, the more cash these businesses consume. And
Mhm.
this wasn't a problem at the beginning of the year 2000 when .com mania was in full swing, and it was easy. You just hold up a flag on outside in the highway, and the money truck would pull up and dump it on the driveway, and you just kind of went out with your pitchforks and shoveled it through the window.
Right.
But then the .com bubble burst, and all of a sudden, no money. So
Mhm.
we're just about to go bankrupt being successful. And that was the closest, the most ironic moment. We'd finally solved the problem. Orders were flooding in,
Mhm.
and we were going to run out of money trying to run that business. And
I
so
remember
that
that.
was the point we said, we can't do this. This is the time to sell the company.
I remember that too, and it's interesting because I remember even at one stage, like there was, you guys were constantly iterating the business model, and I remember at one point, I think it was like this might have been later, this might have been in the earlier 2000s, when it was like you can get one CD for this price, or two for this price, or three
Yep.
for this price, and there was always these evolutions, and then I think you split the site was like one was DVD, one was this, and then a thing we apologized for splitting it. Like there was a lot of testing in the background. But how many iterations from the business model perspective, just because I think people around the world would be blown away, how many iterations of business models did you have to go through, and how tricky was it to like, because you have customers paying for this model, but now you're switching it, right? You guys were kind of building the airplane in the air. How many business models did you guys adjust before you kind of found something that nice stride 2.5
Well,
years?
we're doing it. I mean, doing it while it's in the air is a great analogy. And in our case, even worse. What was happening is we would build the new device in the, not to stretch the analogy here, we're in the cockpit, we build a new plane, and then 3 or 4 of us fly away and leave the rest of the airliner just on its own, which is going to crash. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
it's horrible thing, but it was a courageous, it would be a cruel and unusual thing. It was really an airplane full of people. But in terms of a business, it's really a courageous thing that many times we were willing to walk away from one business model to jump to a new one because we saw the writing on the wall that you had to go where the customers wanted to go. And I'll just give you two quick examples of it.
Mhm.
I probably could give you a bunch of them. So one of them was at the beginning, I mentioned that it was a DVD rental by mail business,
So similar to the Blockbuster model, right?
identical to Blockbuster model, due dates, late fees, the whole thing. And we went to all this effort to make sure we had a copy of every single DVD available. And that was a hard thing to do back then. And so
Is bottom wholesale, or how did you guys?
yeah, you had to buy, no, you had to buy them retail because they wouldn't sell them to us wholesale. And so we had to go, we used to drive around, and buy them at at stores where we could find them. But it was really hard because no one was carrying DVDs at the time. So as an afterthought, we also began selling DVDs. We figure we've got them and no one else has them, so we'll sell them too. And it was a huge success. So much so that just a few months in, 98% of our revenue was coming from selling DVDs.
Oh, wow.
And we kind of came to this realization that this was good news in that it was giving us velocity. Orders were coming in. We had lots of customer contact. So we could begin to experiment about trying to get rental to work. But the downside is doing two things simultaneously, rental and sales, was really confusing. It was confusing for customers because on the homepage, we're trying to describe what we did. It was really confusing for the checkout process. It was confusing for inventory management. All the metrics were confusing. And we kind of came to this realization that if we were going to get something right, we had to pick one of these two things and focus everything on it. And we could have focused on selling DVDs, but that was a commodities business. And just a matter of time before Amazon entered and Walmart and Kmart and PetSmart, whoever entered. And rental, though, we realized if we could figure it out, could be a huge business, but it was 2% of our business. It was nothing. But so there was one example. In one day, we pulled the plug, walked away entirely from selling, and bet everything we could figure out rental.
So 98%.
Very sobering moment.
So you cut off 98% of revenue just like that.
Yep. Because we realized that ironically, doing both at the same time was making it less likely that either would be successful. So you had to walk away from the successful model, this current model, to make sure you have the future model correct. So great. Now we'll fast forward 2 years. We come up with this new no due dates, no late fees model.
Was that out of invention, or was that out of people writing, or what was surveys? How did you guys get that idea?
Reed and I were in our warehouse, and warehouse by then has probably 200,000 or 300,000 DVDs in it. And I remember us standing there kind of just BSing about it, going, it's such a waste that all these discs are sitting in a warehouse where they're doing nobody any good. Wouldn't it be kind of cool if we could figure out a way to store our discs at customers' houses? Well, they can watch them, at least they're doing something. Right. And then we begin brainstorming, could we do a peer-to-peer system where people mail them to each other? Right. And then that's when we came up with the idea, let's just let them keep them as long as they want. And when they're done with it, they mail it back, we'll replace it. And then we go, yeah, well, that's going to require someone to have to come to the website and tell us the next movie. So we go, how about if we have them make a list and then we automatically mail them a movie? How will they feel about that? We had no idea. And then we said, rather than charge them each time they want to swap, let's just make it a flat monthly fee, watch as often as you want. So it was just weird. We were talking at the beginning of our discussion about iterative ideas and breakthrough ideas. And the iterative ideas were chipping away, but gosh, painfully slowly. It was the breakthrough idea that instantly transformed the business. But then the same thing happened. We go, wow, right now our a la carte business is most of our revenue, but it's confusing. We have we have all you can eat, and we have the no due dates, we have due dates, and checkout is complicated because people want to do both now, and inventory is hard. All right, we're going to completely pull the plug. We're going to walk away from the a la carte business and bet everything on that we can get this no due dates, no late fees. We walked away from that. Then you brought up a next one where all of a sudden streaming is starting to work. This is in 2007. And a few years later, What a surprise. Having streaming and DVDs is confusing to customers.
Mhm.
They aren't sure what our business is. Our checkout process is complicated, et cetera, all the exact same stuff. And the realization is if we're really going to win at streaming, which is so clearly the future, why don't we focus everything on it? And Netflix walked away from the DVD business, but they didn't manage it very well and people flipped out and they had to walk it back, but they walked it back in name. In other words, they said, oh, we're combining them back together again. But in reality, internally, there was no change. It was still every decision, there's going to be no consideration made to its impact in the DVD business. If doing the right thing here on streaming gets you a 5% increase positive and a 50% negative on the DVD, we're still going to do it. We're willing to sacrifice our existing business, which at the time had tens of millions of subscribers.
Mhm.
We're willing to sacrifice that business in exchange for the streaming.
Holy cow. Now, how did you prevent churn early on? Churn is obviously drop off rates from recurring, customers billing. Did you guys ever run into that? Or did you guys price it so strategically that it kind of never was an issue?
No, I think that was one of the miracles. And when
Mhm.
I said that, wow, it worked, it's because it worked remarkably well. And we did, I said a couple of times I was a direct marketing guy.
Mhm.
And I remember having this big argument with Reed about having our first month free, first of all.
Mhm.
Then even more incendiary was I wanted it to be a negative option. And a negative option, of course, means that if you don't do anything, you automatically have your credit card hit. And Reed was going, that's sleazy. And I'm going, no, it's not. Let's assume they're going to like it rather than assume they're not going to like it. And when we got to the end of it, so we rolled this thing out and the uptake was huge, but we were waiting because no one was paying for it. And we were just waiting for those first customers to hit 30 days.
Yeah.
And they began getting their credit cards be hit to this, like 90 some odd percent. And we were all astounded. And then even more scary was waiting the next 30 days to see what
They
the
would
churn rate would
cancel or
be.
they would, yeah, yeah.
But again, everything I said before that we spent more time figuring out what we're going to test, how we're going to measure success than we did arguing about what to test.
Mhm.
That we were very, very deliberate, knowing that churn was critical. So we had the site completely instrumented. I mean, I was and am a metrics nerd. Reed was a mathematician. So between the two of us, we were extremely ahead of the curve when it came to having a data-driven culture and a metrics-driven organization.
What do you think? Because you guys really pioneered it on a major way, and literally, I think you guys paved the way for everybody and their mom has a business on recurring revenue. That's the whole thing. Everybody wants to bill the credit cards every month. But I'm curious, what do you think? Because when I look at companies, for example, a Dropbox, a Zoom, right, any of these other companies, software companies that have it on a monthly membership, I think one of the common denominators I find in a weird way is that they're kind of like, for lack of a better expression, insurance policies, meaning like Netflix is kind of like an entertainment insurance. You may not always use it, but it's such a fair price on the monthly that whether I use it or not, it's still worth it to not it's not worth it to go and cancel it. The assurance and insurance that it's there works. Same thing with Dropbox and some of these other platforms. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are looking at maybe creating a membership model? And what are some common denominators you've seen of companies that work and retain membership really well versus those where churn is kind of high, the drop off is kind of high and kind of fizzles out and it's hard to build a sustainable business with?
So advice number one is do not listen to Omar. If you don't even think for a second that people are along for the ride without thinking about it. And while in fact that may be true, it's an extremely dangerous position to take. That you have to take the opposite position, which is that you have to be subscription businesses um, are a very, very customer driven business, as opposed to how, for example, software used to be sold, where you buy it and you own it. And so it was entirely about, can I talk someone into this future utility?
Mhm.
And then they could hate it, but tough luck, got your money.
Right.
Not with subscription businesses, not with recurring revenue businesses. You've got to earn it every single month, because every single month they have the opportunity to say, I'm not getting value from this anymore. I'm out.
Right.
And that means you have to have it priced fairly. You
Mhm.
have to be delivering. You've got to ensure that you are at every stage of the way being totally in touch with what people want. And in fact, it even goes to the fact that Netflix, this probably was in the last 12 to 18 months, I can't remember when, sent an email out to millions of subscribers saying, it looks like you're not using the service anymore. Um, we don't want you paying for something you're not using. Would
Mhm.
you like to cancel? Can we cancel you?
Mhm.
To the point they didn't want that feeling they were taking advantage of anybody.
Right. Now, do you find that companies that there are a lot of companies out there that are trying to create memberships that maybe aren't having success with it because of X, Y, Z reason?
Yeah, it's an interesting
Right.
thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So first of all, I mean, I think Netflix was one of the very, very first subscription-based
Right.
companies. And I
Right.
think a lot of that came from the fact that I had come from that world and I was one of the early people transitioning into it, that I had done so much magazine circulation, subscription businesses. But now, of course, everyone's doing that. And
Right.
it's obvious it's a very, very powerful business model.
Mhm.
But you're right, it does not fit all. And I'll give you a great example.
Mhm.
I own this, uh, who makes it? Toshiba? A scanner, a sheet fed scanner.
Mhm.
God, I wish I knew the name because I'd love to publicly shame them. And it was a hardware device, and you put it in your desk and you put its paper in it, zips it through, and the image immediately pops up on your computer where you can do what you want with it. That worked fantastically until some genius said, we need this thing where we sell a scanner and that's the last money we get isn't any good. We need a recurring revenue model. And now began putting in place that to use this thing, you have to subscribe. And then they have to back into why on earth would you subscribe? And so what they decided was a good idea was that you would scan your piece of paper in, they'd send it on the internet back into the cloud, store it on their servers, and then redeliver it to your desktop under the pretense that we can have added value by it's always a, yeah, what a bunch of crap. That was them trying to force fit a
Mhm.
business into a recurring revenue model that I don't think ended up upsetting more people. And so what they were doing was putting their business model first.
Mhm.
It's something that I refer to as stocking the milk at the back of the store.
Mhm.
Um, Anybody who's going to a grocery store knows intuitively where the milk is. It's always in that back refrigerator in the very furthest point where you have to walk past the chips and you have to walk past the beer, and you have to walk past the snack food and all that stuff and buy all kinds of crap you weren't even thinking of to get
Right.
to the milk. And that is not because all of us go, gee, we would love the milk to be in the furthest location. It's because it's what suits the store's business model.
Right.
And that is so completely backwards. You have got to be putting your customer first, because if you're not willing to disrupt your own business in the exchange of doing stuff for the customer, I guarantee there's somebody waiting in the wings to do it to you.
I love that, Mark. That's super good. Now, what about CEOs who, like a lot of people wrote in, they have companies and they're trying to hire, right? One of the biggest challenges in any business, obviously, aside from the business and making the money work and the model, is the people. What advice, being the CEO of not just Netflix, but in all your experience in all your different businesses, what are some strategies you found to really acquire the best talent, recruit the best talent, hiring, firing? What should CEOs and leaders of companies really look for when hiring quality talent to grow the business?
Well, the first one is making sure this is obvious, but it has to be a priority. I mean, you have to allocate the time to it. It's not something you can delegate. It's so important, and especially at the beginning,
Mhm.
because your culture ends up being modeled by who your first employees are.
Mhm.
And if you don't get that right, you're not just under executing in the present, but you're executing for years and years into the future because of the cultural mistakes that are going to get passed on. Um, and the other piece, though, is recognizing that you're hiring for different things depending upon what stage your company is at. And that when you're early, like when you're doing a startup, when you're hiring your first dozen, 2 dozen, maybe 100 employees, your emphasis is much more on adaptability, on flexibility, on being very high performing generalists,
Mhm.
because quite frankly, you never know what that person is going to come into work and be doing that day. And you want people who are totally comfortable with, okay, that didn't work. Now we're doing this. And not only not grumbling about it, but in fact going, that's awesome. I was getting tired of doing the same thing for 3 days in a row. And of course, as the business gets bigger, you're looking for very, very different types of expertise. And the last one is, I'd say, whatever you've kind of worked out, that's the wrong word for it. It's important to be willing to say no, even to people who appear perfect if they don't seem to be a good fit. That's my opinion. It's really hard to reverse these mistakes. And it's more important to identify someone based on what they're going to be able to accomplish rather than what they have accomplished. And so I spend most of my time trying to evaluate all the things that I expect this person to do. Do I think they have the skills to be able to do that? I don't really care what they were doing before.
And how about decision making? As an entrepreneur, there's so many decisions to make at any given time. There's so many things to evaluate. You may not have all the information at times. What have you found to be your sort of litmus test, if you will, or your rule of thumb when it comes to making challenging decisions on a time crunch where you may not have all the information? There's a lot of moving parts. Maybe you have to decide to, launch this business model or try this thing and have it in a specified time. As an entrepreneur, specifically nowadays, we all are so inundated with so many inputs. What, in your experience, has worked when making decisions and sticking to them when you don't know what to do and nobody around you seems to have the answer for you? What's worked for you?
It's a interesting question. I'm struggling with a bunch of different directions to go with it. I'll go in two different directions that I think are both valid. The first one is that one of the hallmarks of an entrepreneur, I believe, is this ability to make these decisions based on incomplete or inconclusive, or even worse, contradictory information. And that is something you develop over time, is all of a sudden you go, I know what this problem is. This is one of those problems where there is no good answer. So the more time I spend circling around, oh, A is great, but it has this and this, but it's lacking this. Oh, B has that. Oh, but it's lacking this. Oh, C, and you keep going in a circle. And it's something you realize, oh, I know what's happening. Okay, I'm going to have to pick something which I know is suboptimal, but I'm going to pick it. And so part of it is becoming comfortable with making decisions for which you don't have a good basis upon which to make a decision. Mm-hmm. It's being able to maneuver in the fog. And that's practice, in my opinion. That's not discipline. That's not telling yourself. That's getting used to making decisions like that and recognizing that the world did not collapse. I got three things. This is too good of a question to do it too. All right. The second one is to recognize that when it comes to making decisions, there's two, broadly speaking, types of decisions. And I'm going to borrow from Jeff Bezos, who called them one-way door decisions and two-way door decisions. Mm-hmm. And now a two-way door decision, or one-way door decision first. A one-way door decision is where you go, I have to do this. I'm going to walk through that door. It's going to slam shut and lock behind me. I can't go back. One-way door decisions, you better have your shit together. You better study the problem. You better make sure you understand as best you can what the risks are and you've prepared yourself for them. You've really worked it through. That's a one-way door decision. But the reality is, in a company, and especially in a startup, the vast majority of decisions are two-way door decisions where you can walk through, look around, and if you don't like what you see, you just walk right back and the door swings the other way. No harm, no foul. And the skill is to recognize which is which. The problem is that what most companies do is when they have a fair amount of one-way door decisions, when they're in finance or whether they're in pharma or whether they're in healthcare, is they build this decision-making mechanism by which everything looks like a nail. In other words, every decision gets put through the one-way door ringer, even though 98% of the decisions they have to make are two-way door decisions. So that's my second thing about how I think about decision making, is I quickly recognize, oh, this is a two-way door decision. I don't need to get it right, because the consequences of getting it wrong are trivial. If we don't like what we find, we reverse it. No harm, no foul. This is a one-way door decision. I can't mess this one up. The third one is, culturally, from the very beginning, Netflix, whose culture kind of comes from how I behaved, was one in which it's almost entirely about freedom and responsibility. It's letting other people make decisions. It's giving them the freedom to do their job. They're the closest to the problem. They're the closest to the customer. They're the closest to what they need to understand in order to make a good decision. So let's let them make the decision, coupled with the responsibility of accomplishing the things they need to accomplish. And so, for example, at Netflix, it's actually codified this way, that a manager really only has two responsibilities, and neither of them is making decisions. The first one is making sure the right people are in the right seats. So it's a staffing. Who are the right players? Do I have the right people? And that, hiring well, cutting sharply, et cetera. The other responsibility is ensuring that every single person has all the information they need to make good decisions. Do they understand what our objectives are? Do they understand what other parts of the company are doing? Do they understand the market, our competition, our objectives this quarter, this year? And then leave them alone. And so the objective is to not make decisions. And in fact, I was socializing with Reed a couple months ago, and he goes, one of the things that I measure myself on is how long can I go without making a decision? And he goes, I'm going now for probably 3 or 4 months without having made a decision, which is his way of knowing that he's done a very, very good job putting in the right seats the people who have the ability to do this, and that they're all clear on what they need to understand in order to be empowered to make good decisions.
Wow, that is so powerful. So being able to hire people so that you sort of, you give them autonomy, but you're making sure that you're putting the right people there in the first place. And that starts at the ground level. Exactly. You're essentially not hiring people, you're hiring decision makers.
That's exactly right. And we'll expand on it for 2 seconds if you've got a minute. But for example,
I got all day for you, bud.
Netflix spends, what's the number? $18 billion a year on content. Could that be right? Or is it 12? Is it 18? Huge amount of money. Okay. That's a lot of responsibility. Now, does Reed make any of those green lighting decisions? Zero. Does Ted Sarandos, who's now co-CEO but head of content, make decisions? No. Does Ted's direct reports make decisions? No. The people below them make decisions? Sometimes, but rarely. It's even lower than that. People greenlight $100 million productions who are 4 and 5 levels down. And it's because they are the ones who are closest to the market, who understand best what content is needed, who the producers are, what the challenges are, and they're empowered to make those decisions. You've got to have great judgment. But again, that's being the right people in the right seats. And unless you think that this management style is purely for VPs and directors, I'll give you 2 quick examples. So one is, okay, you have a receptionist, okay?
Receptionist, yeah.
And the receptionist, a lot of companies, the receptionist feels their job is, I need to be in my seat from 8 in the morning until 5 o'clock at night, blah, blah, blah. And at my companies, or Netflix in particular, it's not. You go, your job is to put the best face in the company. That's it. And
your job is what?
That's it. Put the best face on the company.
Put the best face on the company.
And I want you to decide how that's done. What hours do you think you need to be here? They can make those decisions. What happens at lunch? Do you have to get someone to cover for yourself? All right, let's say you have a doctor's appointment. I don't care. Find someone to cover for you. You make the decision. Is it appropriate to eat at your desk or not eat at your desk? And they understand the objectives but they're give so they but and the responsibility to do these things, but the freedom to figure out the best way to do it. And that's so motivating. That's what everyone wants, is this chance to come to work trying to solve these cool problems. I feel like I own my domain. It can happen at every level of the company. And one more, engineer came to me a bunch of years ago, uh, and he goes, "I got great news, Mark. I'm in love." And I go, "Oh God, good for you." And he
Okay.
goes, "Yeah, the problem is she lives in San Diego. And so here's what I'm proposing." He goes, "What I want to do is I want to be able to leave. I'm going to leave Thursday nights. I'm going to work from there Friday, all day Friday, say the weekend. I'll work from there Monday and I'll come home Monday night and be in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday." Now, this is an engineering manager, team of engineers working for him. And I said, "Okay, now, if what you're asking is, um, do I need can I work from San Diego?" Well, the answer is easy. I don't care where you work from. You can work from the moon for all I care. But your job is to manage people. And if you can do that, not being there, all power to you. You're a smarter, better manager than I could be.
Mhm.
But if you're asking me, is it okay for me to not do my job well? The answer to that is easy too. No. But it's up to you. I don't care when you work. I don't care where you work from. I don't care how many hours you work. I don't care what vacations you take. I have an expectation of what I expect from you. And we've been very clear about me defining that for you. But how you choose to solve the problem, it's up to you. And makes a decision. And the girlfriend probably wasn't very happy about the decision. But
Right.
he could do that himself, as opposed to coming to me and saying, "Make a decision about where I work from, what hours I work." I'm not going to do that. It's not my job. It's his job. Um, and that's what I mean by empowering. Those are some ways to think about decision making.
Holy cow. May I ask you one more question? I promise. I know we're coming up here on time.
Okay.
Um, Last question I have for you is, and it goes back to this root thing, and it goes to, I love what you said. I have it down on my notes here, the underlying behavior. I listened to one of your interviews where you mentioned that there was a woman who wanted to start a company where people could kind of the Netflix of clothes, so to speak, right? Like share clothing. And instead of worrying about investors and all this stuff, you said, well, couldn't you get a paper and a Sharpie and on your dorm room door put a thing that says, "Hey, want to borrow my clothes? Let me know or contact me." And then in that process of that, you find out the nuances: how much is dry cleaning, if they like it, how you like a stain on your shirt, things that you didn't think about when you were planning your multi-million-dollar idea in your room where it just moves perfectly. So the question I have for you is, with that point in mind, I know that's such so it's a part of the message and the ethos of your podcast and your book, and I highly recommend people check it out. That will never work. But my question is, for entrepreneurs out there who really have these ideas and these series of ideas, right, like yourself, there's always these new ideas. What is your strategy or system for how to test ideas quickly and know where you are in space? Do you do it on short time horizons? Should there always be a metric for their experiment? Should you go get feelers? I mean, because it's one thing to test things, but it's another thing to do a test and go, okay, well, shit, what do I do next, right? How do I know where I am in space? So, in your experience, what advice would you have to entrepreneurs at any age around the world that are like, okay, I'm inspired, Mark, I'm going to try a simple action, a very simple way to test my ideas, but how do I know when to follow the trace of that or try a new thing? How do I know where I am in space?
Okay. So it's a great question, and I'll give you the answer first, and I'll give you the nuance. And the answer is, of course, you have to start by colliding the idea with reality and never stop doing that. Now, everyone out there probably is going, "Oh yeah, God, that's such great advice." And then you get back from walking the dog or wherever you're listening to this, and all of a sudden you go, "Wait a minute, how do I do that?" And so I will
Not
tell you in a
applied to
minute.
my idea. Exactly. Maybe it's easy for him with to mail
Exactly.
me, but
Well,
not me and my.
one of the reasons that I have the podcast, That Will Never Work podcast, is for exactly this reason. Is I walk people through these things that I'm helping them actually walk through in reality, in their particular circumstance. What do I do? How do I think about this? I break the problem down. I decided a long time ago I was not going to be one of those people who's basically dispensed advice in perfect little quote bubbles that that sounded good, and then you're gone, popped, and then what? Now I don't know what they do. That doing this is having some idea what to do, but how to approach the problem is everything. And by listening in as I'm mentoring real entrepreneurs with real problems, this wide range of them, it's an incredibly helpful way, I think, to try to get a sense of, oh, I understand. Seeing someone do it is really helpful in helping yourself go, how do I take this and apply it to my problem? But the quick answer is it is all about the quick, cheap, and simple. It is breaking the problem down, isolating the most important component and saying, I'm just going to worry about testing that. I mean, for the example you gave is a great one, which is um, the woman who said, I have this great idea for a peer-to-peer clothing sharing company and was dreaming about apps and fundraising. And I'm going, let's just start. Let's start by figuring out whether there's a there. Get a Sharpie and write on the door, write in the piece of paper, want to borrow clothes, knock. And if no one knocks, well, you've learned right away something. But then if they knock, you're going to learn the next phase, which is how about fit and style? And then if they find things that fit and they like, you're going to find out the next thing, which is how do you feel when a stain comes back and dry cleaning? You're right. But all those steps, you have to do them and you have to figure out a way to have them happen quickly. And that's walking through an example with her. But no matter, every problem has a clever way of approaching the problem like that, where you're parsing apart, what am I really curious about? And is there a different way for me to discover that, which I can discover tomorrow? I do a lot of work with these university age entrepreneurs. And I go, if you have a retail product, get out there and stand in the store and start intercepting people. Mock something up and put it on the shelf. Don't even tell anybody. And then see how people react to it. And if they pick it up, then zoom in and interrogate them. I mean, start this whole process of learning, get the idea out of your head. That's the trick. Get it out of your head. Once it's in the real world, you will be learning faster than you can imagine. And that's how you stay oriented in space by periodically lifting your head up and looking a little bit in the future and going, okay, I'm going in the right direction. And then you're right back in front at what can I do now? What can I do now? Most people are the opposite. It's in their head. They're dreaming about, they pitch me, imagine how powerful this will be when I have 1 million users. And I go, shut up. I want to know what you're doing to get user 10.
Yeah,
If you
exactly.
can't deliver utility and to user 1, you're never going to be able to deliver utility to 1 million people because you're never going to get there.
Mhm.
But at the same time, periodically, you can look up and go, where am I going? But if you're focused on that, you'll be heading in the wrong direction for about 4 years. Whereas if you're looking right in front of you, you'll immediately see that big rock and you'll go a different way to get around it.
And what you're looking for underneath that, I love you said underlying behavior. You're looking for the underlying behavior that you can kind of align with. Would you say that's what you're looking for with all this experimentation? Because some companies work, but it's a harder sell, or there's friction at point of sale where it'll work, but it's not in flow. Whereas something, it might be oversimplistic, but with Netflix, people, it's like a no-brainer. Like, oh yeah, 30 days, I can watch whatever I want, X price, cool. It's a flowy thing, but it took so much of your brain power and all these crazy ideas to come up with like $9.99 a month, or
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
it's not obvious at all.
Right.
No one had done
Exactly.
this before. It's completely ridiculous that I mean, getting a DVD mailed to you is ridiculous. Why would I do that when I can go to a Blockbuster right down the corner? These are all ridiculous things that you only begin to realize you're not quite ridiculous is when you get someone to do it. And then you find out, was it ridiculous or not? And this was back 22 years ago when we did not have Shopify. We did not have we didn't have Stripe or PayPal or all these incredible technology stuff. We didn't have A/B testing.
Mhm.
The shit that people can do now in a weekend makes what we did over 6 months look like nothing. And that's why there's no reason you can't quickly and easily validate these ideas before you have to figure out what's going on here. Is your idea, most people think they're right about what people want, and
Mhm.
that all they have to do is solve the how. And I think usually they're wrong about what people want. And if you wait until you've built the how to find out, well, you just wasted a lot of time, because building the how is always harder than figuring out what people want.
And when you figure out what they want, then it flows more.
It does. It becomes evident. They tell you what they tell you how to solve their problem. They tell you what they want. They're very clear about what works and what doesn't work. And again, you're always wrong. There's no such thing as a good idea. You're always wrong. What you start with is never what ends up being successful. But if you're lucky, you get permission to keep paying your salaries for long enough to discover it. And that pivot, it just happens. If you're open to it, you're going, we're selling to this market, and God, it's just not resonating. And then out of the blue, someone calls you up and goes, could I use this for an And you go, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that. Let's try it. And lo and behold, then all of a sudden you find a new market. And then the courage part kicks in, of being willing to walk away from this one that you've been flogging for a year, to put all your resources behind this new one, which just might work. Listen, we can't solve all the problems. It takes years of learning these things incrementally, but you got to start. And you're doing one thing, but listening and getting inspired to try something. But fundamentally, if you leave it in your head, you'll never get any place.
Yeah, in your head, you're dead. And my audience,
I like that one.
My audience would kill me if I didn't ask you the Blockbuster conversation when you met with Blockbuster. What was that like? Just real quick. I know we're short on time here.
Oh, that's okay. I did mention before how we had almost dead and we needed to sell the company, and the obvious candidate was Blockbuster, and took forever to get a meeting because we were tiny back then. We were like $5 million or something like that, and they were $6 billion. But finally, get the meeting. We fly to Dallas. We're up in the skyscraper.
Are you nervous?
Yeah, I was terrified. And even worse than that, we were on this corporate retreat when they called, and they're Blockbuster. They go, "We'll see you. We have a slot tomorrow at 11." We're going, we're in the middle of nowhere, and we're on retreat. So all of a sudden I show up, and there we are in this huge cavernous conference room, and I'm in shorts and a t-shirt with flip-flops on. So there was a whole bunch of reasons I was going, I am way outmatched here. But, I still kind of believed in logic. And it was evident to us that combining Blockbuster and Netflix was brain dead simple. It was obvious. This blended model of store and online would crush everything. And I go, as soon as they get that, they'll immediately realize what an incredible alliance this is. And they did. They kind of going, this is interesting. We like this idea, until they got to the price. And we said $50 million because just coincidentally, we were $50 million in debt. And figured that was a nice, neat number. At least we could pay back our investors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Clean. And they laughed at us. And it was a really sobering moment, because not only were they not going to save us, now they were going to compete with us. And having struggled already to find a way through, we kind of realized that the only way we were going to make this happen was to completely rely on ourselves. And, my dad used to sometimes, when I was stuck on something, he'd go, Mark, sometimes the only way out is through. And that was certainly the case here.
And the rest is history, my friend.
And now the company they could have bought for $50 million has a market cap of $250 billion. And the company, which had 9,000 stores, is down to 1. Yeah. So again, if you're not willing to disrupt yourself, you are leaving it wide open for someone to disrupt your business for you.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Mark. You've definitely brought your passion, your story in an incredible way. Would love to do a round 2 soon. And I look forward to a lot of my audience checking out your book, That Will Never Work, as well as the podcast. Make sure to follow Mark in the description below. We have it all laid out for you. And thank you as always, Mark. Appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It was really fun chatting about this stuff. Good luck to you and everyone out there. Remember, you don't get anywhere if you don't start.
If you guys enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that subscribe button right now, because every week we bring you the very best in personal development content, interviews, and insights to help inspire you to take your life and your dreams and make them a reality. And also, if you want to know how to book dream guests the same way I have, You can check the link below for my top 3 secrets. So if you have a podcast or a show or whatever it is and you want to collaborate with them, if you click that link below, I'll give you those top 3 secrets to help you get in touch with anybody. And also, don't forget that The Passionate Few is available on media platforms as well. So you can subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, thank you for being one of the passionate few.